Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're watching this, and welcome to Painting with Stephen, episode 12. So, this is quite an exciting one for me because I think it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. If you were watching episode 11 last week, you would have heard me discuss the rugged Highland landscape as a motif when painting, and how it's definitely something that I've always wanted to do, but what has always sort of stopped me in the past is the sort of browns and greens that you would find in that sort of landscape, and how it's very, very difficult to pull off successfully. However, I have definitely, I think, been successfully working on that technique, on how to get my greens to actually retain their energy and have the excitement needed to hold the viewer's attention. And I feel episode 11 was a success for me in that way, and I decided, you know something, I've had this idea for a while in terms of composition. So I decided, you know something, compositionally, I'm going to lay all this out and I'm going to go for it. So this is what I am attempting with this painting, is a Highland landscape. Now, this is very loosely based off of another work. The work is entitled The Massacre of Glencoe. Okay? And it's not the same, obviously, and as you know, if you also listened to episode 11, you would have heard me discuss motifs and how different landscapes and different compositional ideas and different even colour can be used to completely change the artistic meaning of a painting, or channel different emotional intents based on the schemas of the viewer. And I think, with something like this, a rugged Highland landscape, especially being a native Scot, there's just an instant evocation of mystery, of drama, of sadness. And I think that comes from, obviously, the death of Gaelic Highlands clan culture and the clearances that really killed it, or at least were the final nail in the coffin of that culture, seeing its last throes. And really, I think it represented to so many artists, creatives, authors, the untamed sort of landscape that was then mirrored by the people that were on it. I think you could definitely draw parallels between the Highland landscape in the 16 and 1700s and the Wild West that would obviously come in the 1800s in America. Rugged, jagged, mysterious, ominous, caked in superstition, with frontiers that civilization was afraid to go and discover and explore, and a people that were very, very different from the civilizations around them, that had their own ideas of honour, their own ideas of right and wrong, and in a lot of ways we're living in the past, but not in a bad way necessarily. Just didn't really fit into the wider United Kingdom the same way that, for example, the Lowland Scots did, when of course the union of the crowns took place. James VI united the Kingdom of Scotland and the Kingdom of England, and then of course the subsequent Jacobite rebellions that followed. Of course there was about 3 of them, which all culminated in 1745 and the defeat at Culloden, which was really the end of the Jacobite threat and the Highland threat, because of course Highland culture was seen as a threat by Lowland Scotland and England and the British Crown, also because, very importantly, they were Catholic, more because it represented in a more rudimentary sense the religion of their ancestors, but also because it keeps them distinct from their Protestant lowland neighbours. Now, why am I saying all this? I'm saying this because when I paint a landscape that is attempting to evoke the Scottish Highlands, even in a fantasy setting, I am evoking this schema of thought. We are unlocking this whole chapter of history which people will then subconsciously take on board. And just the same way, if you were to paint the epic canyons and rock pillars of Kansas or Colorado, it would evoke the mystique of the Wild West. These rugged landscapes with their browns and greens and subdued aspects, they evoke the Scottish ruggedness and the mystique that was really created through our history. Me being a Lowland Scot myself, my ancestors would have undoubtedly fought on the side of government against these Highland warriors, Mackenzie, MacDonald, these great clans that used to lay claim to the lands of the Highlands. But I think because of Sir Walter Scott and Scottish Romanticism and the literary and artistic movement that took place, which saw the romanticisation of characters like Rob Roy McGregor and the Highland way of life and their archaic codes of honour and duty. I think the romanticisation of those movements in Scottish Romanticism did have a massive effect on almost creating an us and them mentality, as if it was England versus Scotland, and Scotland were represented by the Highlands. But of course, history is a lot more complex than this, and that is simply just not true. Many people in Scotland saw Highlanders as not just a threat to their livelihoods, their kingdom, their religion, but also saw them as a very distinct ethnic group with their own pitfalls, problems, and most importantly, different from them. I don't want to use the word racially, but essentially racially, right? Definitely separated by more than just landscape. They were separated by everything: culture, religion, even clothing, musical tradition. Very, very different. So, yeah, I mean, that is essentially what I'm evoking here. But, as usual, again, if you've watched my previous episodes, you'll know that I'm painting more as I understand it and like to see it, a fantasy take on this landscape. So that's what's going on here. Now, this is, again, I should have started off by saying this. This is acrylic that I'm working in right now. If you have watched my previous episodes, 11, 10, Fingal's Cave, the Shattered Redoubt of the previous week, you'll have seen that I'm putting a lot more attention, a lot more stock into my acrylic layers, and these acrylic layers are becoming more and more important to the final piece. And so much so that I decided to record my acrylic work last episode, which I think was the right decision, and I think I will be doing from now on. And this work here is essentially all acrylic. I mean, I did most of the heavy lifting with the acrylic layers on this one. The oils really just give it that last final atmospheric push at the end. One caveat with recording my acrylic layers is the fact that it's so bloody long. I mean, I suppose it's maybe not as good from a viewing perspective because it's so long, but then at the same time it's all quite useful information when it comes to actually learning technique, and I do feel that it's very useful to just see how I'm getting these results if you are here for actually learning how to paint. So I'm including the acrylic layers. I've had a nightmare today trying to put this video together for no other reason than the acrylic layers videos were so long that my computer sort of almost just refused to take them. So, I've been spending so long trying to put this video together, and now I'm doing the voiceover at like 9 o'clock at night. So it's been a long process, but it's worth it, because at the end of the day, if I was just beginning how to paint, I'd want to see the whole process too. So it is worth it. And at the end of the day, I think it's very useful to see, just how to use acrylic layers, in the sense that it's such a different ball game when it comes to layering colour, layering atmosphere. It's just a game changer, and that's why I'm really enjoying using them. It's very different for me. Obviously, if you look at my episode 1 on this channel, episode 2, you will undoubtedly see that I only used oils, didn't use acrylics. One of the reasons for that was because of the texture of oil paints. It's more of a thick sort of I don't want to say thick viscosity, because that's not quite illustrating what I mean. It's just got a different texture, doesn't it? I mean, let's put it simply, it's got a different texture. One other reason why I always traditionally really love to work with oils is actually one of the main reasons why I am now sort of moving away from them in my bottom layers, which is its slow drying time. One of the main reasons I love working with oils is because I loved blending on canvas. I still do, by the way. that's just something that I feel is so useful when it comes to things like skies, water, you know, that sort of thing. However, not quite as useful when it comes to detail work, especially if you're planning to very quickly layer colour and very quickly do atmospheric layering, like I'm going to do in the oil stage of this video. So keeping that in mind, I think it's a very important thing to bring up, that, you know, oils definitely have their place, acrylics have their place also, and now I'm really trying to combine the two and get the best of both worlds. Now, here's something that I find very, very fascinating, and I think I mentioned this in episode 11 also. I sort of had the idea, certainly for years and years of my life, when I've been painting with oils, that you could really only achieve a desirable impasto effect with oils, because oils lended themselves to that technique. But I am really not experiencing that. Certainly in episode 11, when I got that nice texture, in fact episode 10 when I did Fingal's Cave, I got that nice rocky texture with the big rock pillars that form Fingal's Cave. In episode 11, played around with that thick impasto technique even more, with the castle and with the rocks, and even used it on the ground terrain. And now with episode 12, as you can see here, a lot of this work that I'm doing, in fact maybe even the bulk of the work that I'm doing right now, is with a knife. It's actually a letter opener, but I explained that in episode 11 too. It's a letter opener, but I'm using it almost as a palette knife-esque tool to achieve this impasto effect. And as you can see, all of the highlights that I've done on those rocks up there have been with my letter opener tool, and I'm getting this this very strong impasto technique, obviously combining it with brush strokes too, but I feel like it's definitely a very, very important thing to note. I'm surprised, frankly, with how effective my impasto is with acrylics in that sense, because it sort of came as a bit of a shock to me. I always sort of thought of acrylics as very maybe more designed for flatter flatter paintings. I know that sounds very silly and simplistic, but or maybe even, you know, sketchbooks. You know, I know of course acrylics have been used to incredible effect by people before me and artists before me, and, you know, I've created incredible works before, but I guess it was just, you know, I never really saw it as my cup of tea. I always thought the texture would be off, I always thought the viscosity would be off, but more fool me, because I am absolutely loving painting with acrylics right now. It's letting me achieve things that I just realistically couldn't achieve with oils at the moment, and that's all because of the drying time, you know. But I can't ever move away from oils, because oils are for me just where it's at when it comes to that final push, that beautiful that beautiful look that an oil paint gives you on the canvas. It's an unexplainable thing. I tell you, it's almost like I started off using a little bit of acrylic here and there, and now I'm almost just pushing more and more and more into having all of my painting become acrylic rather than oil. And I'm almost reluctant to do that, apart from the fact that it's working so damn well for me right now personally. But the thing is that I'm now sort of tempted to try and do bits of the sky with acrylic. And I've done that in the past. Don't get me wrong, I've done that in the past. You know, when it comes to, for example, I've done clouds, parts of clouds with acrylic before, and then tried to layer on top with oils. And, you know, it's always been there. It's always been part of my technique. But I'm starting now to really want to see how layered I can get things with the sky using acrylic. But here's the thing, it's almost like that's the last bastion of my oils, really, when it comes to the way I paint. And I almost don't really want to do that. You know, purely because I still want to have oils as a fundamental part of my paintings. Because I'm so comfortable with them. But no, I think I'm going to be playing around with the concept. I really do. I think my subsequent paintings, or my next paintings, they're going to be utilizing acrylics heavily for the bottom layers, with then oils being brought in to jazz it up on top as my ornament layers, for want of a better way to describe it. You know, the ornamentation at the front, at the top, much like music, right? I mean, music, you know, you sort of utilize things that are going to hold people's attention on the main melody, but the beat, the rhythm, you know, the real meat and bones of your sound, oftentimes isn't flashy, right? I mean, look at the rhythm section of you know, any sort of, for example, jazz band or rock and roll band or whatever, country band, you know, 70s outlaw country, Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, all these great country stars of the 70s. A lot of the time the bass work is certainly nothing flashy, right? You know, boom, boom, the boom, the boom, the boom, the boom, you know, but it gives you this meat and bones for then things like the pedal steel guitar and the Telecasters to really shine through and give you the ornamentation at the front, which then that's what you remember. With painting, I feel like it's much the same a lot of the time. You know, you don't want the viewer's eye to wander to places that are going to distract them from the main focal point of your piece. And oftentimes you actually, by adding in too much detail, sometimes you are actually distracting the viewer from what you want them to see. But, you know, on the flip side, I think one of the main reasons that I'm really moving to acrylics in the first place, for my bottom layers, is to get detail in, you know, because the detail that I can achieve with acrylics, because of the fast drying element to them, and because I can layer colour so quickly, you know, it's just proving to be such a powerful tool. So we'll see. And then of course, you know, I might go back to my nocturnes at some point, you know, because it's one of those things, like, I mean, the nocturnes in a way are sort of effective for that reason, right? The silhouettes of the land masses just give you indication of things. They give you indication of ruined temples, or they give you indication of ruined castles, or they give you indication of mysterious landforms that are far away, but they don't necessarily distract you from the main focal point of the piece, which is usually the colour. It's usually the sky, to be fair, cosmic skies or northern lights or a dramatic sunset. That's what really evokes the emotions in those paintings. The runes are there just to give a sort of mysterious backdrop to those skies, really. Whereas here, a lot of the emotion is coming from this rugged highland landscape. Well, that is, in fact, the main focus of the painting, and so it has to be done with a certain level of detail and a certain level of lack of abstraction, I suppose you could say. Certain level of realism, but it's not quite realism, that's not the word I'm looking for. Certain level of accuracy. Let's go with that word, accuracy. Because if it's not done with accuracy, you'll lose the point of the painting. I mean, for example, well, it would be a laughable comparison to make, but if I was to have done all of what you're seeing now as silhouettes, it would sort of just be a blank canvas, which would sort of be pointless. Let me just quickly talk about something that's sort of more practical. So at the very beginning, and you can still very clearly see right now, I've obviously toned the canvas with an umber. It's a burnt umber that I've used, an acrylic burnt umber, let that dry. And then I have sketched out my, as you can see, the sketch is pretty rough, right? I've sketched out the rough idea of what I want to paint. Now, okay, I feel like that really just gives you a level of confidence and a safety blanket that would be missing if you did that on a white canvas. Okay, now there are multiple ways to skin a cat. I am aware, every artist will have a different way of doing this. Everyone sort of has a different technique of how they lay out their composition before they start. But for me personally, I feel that firstly, like I mentioned in episode 11 and I have mentioned previously, toning your canvas an earth colour is just so forgiving. It's so essential. It's just a brilliant way to start with a landscape, because a hell of a lot of it is going to be umber in tone anyway, so you can let the umber shine through a lot of the time, but also, and more importantly, it lets you more accurately see what colour is actually going on the canvas, right? I'm sure you've heard people talk about that before. The fact that if you have a white canvas, right, and then you put something on it, then it's going to be skewed by the fact that that is your brightest bright. Okay, white is literally, you can't get any brighter. So because there is no middle tone, your colour is going to be skewed, right? You're going to perceive that colour differently to what it really is. Now, if you go in with your middle tones first, now this could be, it doesn't have to be an earth colour, it could be a, middle blue, middle grey. That's very common. People use greys all the time for this. Nice middle tone. Then you can really start to see where your darkest darks and your lightest lights are going to be, because the middle tone evens it all out and allows you to make those decisions far more accurately. Now, I think that's a very, very important aspect of why it's important to tone a canvas. But, you know, I think just purely from even an aesthetic perspective, for whatever reason, for me, when I see a brown canvas, I think sort of classic landscape, and you know, it helps me paint what I want to see more accurately. I know that sounds very strange, but you know, I think it just gives me a mental confidence. I also think it's just so important from the perspective of when I put paint on a brown colour though, an earth colour, there really is just a synergy going on. There's a symbiotic relationship going on with the colours there that just helps make everything work, because greens and browns and greys and browns all work, you know, and you'd be surprised how much umber is just in reality, you know, as the undertone colour for everything that we see, you know. Look at clouds, look at obviously the earth, look at skies, look at water. If you go into the Highland landscape, you know, if you go out into the Highlands of Scotland, what you will find is the water looks brown, you know. It doesn't look grey, it doesn't look blue, it looks brown. And a lot of the time, the sea looks brown too. So starting off with that brown, it just gives you so much forgiveness when it comes to, if it shines through a little bit, it doesn't really matter, you know. Whereas see if this was a white canvas, oh my god, it would be a totally different story. You'd be putting colour down and white would be shining through everywhere. You'd have to scrub like hell with your paint brushes in order to stop that from happening. Okay, so huge difference, okay, in approach. Right, now let's go back to something that I was talking about in episode 11. Now, greens, okay, greens are very difficult to pull off effectively. Maybe this varies from painter to painter, because I feel like every painter finds different things challenging, and every single one will. Now this is what you have to remember. Every single painter, doesn't matter how good or bad they are, is going to find certain aspects of making, for example, a landscape work. Different painters are always going to struggle with different things. So it doesn't matter how effective you are at painting, that person's always still going to find something that just isn't quite their strong suit. Whether it's water, whether it's greens and grasses and lush hills, or whether it's moonlight, or whether it's night scenes, or whether it's day scenes, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. Rocks, a lot of people struggle with rocks. Now, here's the thing, right? I think if I was to pick a main weakness in the past, it would have been greens, and it would have been utilization of greens as the focal point of the painting, like as in what I'm doing now, where all of the ground is green. Okay, I struggle with that, because I feel like you know, for me, I've sort of you know, I've sort of reached a stage now where I'm far more comfortable doing it for myself. And the way I did that was the way I described you in episode 11. Tonal variety and saturation variety are absolutely essential and key to making your landscape actually look believable, plausible, interesting dynamic. Okay, so get your blue, get your yellow, mix like 7 different type of green, okay, and always mix your greens, right? Get your blue, get your yellow, mix 7-8 different types of greens, varying in tone from your blue and your yellow. Then get your umber tones, get like a burnt umber or a raw umber, then you mix that into all those different tones. Then get a grey and mix those into your different green tones, and you'll get these lovely subdued greens, okay, that you can then use all those varieties. You can literally just go from one variety to the other variety and it will be all good. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Just put as many varieties of greens in there as you can, while also of course keeping in mind that certain areas of the landscape will be brighter than others, and keep your shadows in the right place and keep your highlights in the right place, all that stuff, basic stuff, or not basic, but you know what I mean, like keep your compositional rules keep strict to your compositional rules of where your shadows and your highlights are going to be. But in saying that, I think this is why people struggle, including me, struggle with, for example, flat green plains, is that there's not a lot of shadow variety. It's just like a boom, there's a big fucking bit of grass, So then you have to go, okay, how do I make this interesting? How do I make this dynamic? How do I keep viewers' attention? How do I keep people actually interested? Now, as you can see, I'm utilizing a lot of different shades of green in the what looks like just a solid bit of landmass. Then I'm going in with a knife and I'm also adding in browns, greys, yellows, subdued colours, to make it look like rocks and different little indications of different things. I feel like that for me is sort of the key to a successful utilization of green in your landscape. That I feel really is the secret. That is sort of really the secret to all painting, though, isn't it? Is to keep the eye constantly stimulated. The Impressionists, now, obviously, if you know your painting history, the stricter forms of the Renaissance, the Romantic period, the old masters of the past, in all of the incredible art movements that came before the 19th century, they were a lot stricter, I think it's fair to say, with their compositional techniques. They also usually had a lot more time to achieve what they wanted to achieve, I suppose you could say, in the sense that they painted in studios, so the paintings would take weeks or months, and be layered and layered and layered and layered until they got the right desired effect. But when tube paints became available, in the 1800s, and the Impressionists went out and started painting plein air, things became a lot more fast-paced. They needed to capture things quicker, and so they jotted down all of these landscape ideas, but also things became more hazy, things became more abstract, things became more vivid. I really do think it ties in with the sort of fin de siècle mentality that would then, culminate in things like Belgian symbolism. There was almost a rebellion there, wasn't there? There was a innate dissatisfaction with the old sort of more regimented way of painting. And I think to a certain extent, you know, especially when you're getting into things like Belgian symbolism, there was definitely an element of just intense dissatisfaction with the sort of encroaching industrialization and atheism and nihilism, you know, encroaching into Western society. The reason I bring this up is when Impressionists painted, one trick that they used, which is a very interesting trick, sort of ties in with what we're talking about here, is they would use intentionally selected complementary colours. Okay, so if you get a colour wheel and you find the opposite of your colour, so for example, like, you know, I'm really bad at colour theory, so you know, if you got a colour wheel and looked at the exact opposite of what was on the side of the colour wheel, in fact, do you know something? Let me just bring up a colour wheel right now. Look at this. The incredible technology we now have at our disposal. You know? Anyway, sorry. So let's bring up a colour wheel. Alright, so let's say you were going to paint something purple. Okay? If you were going to paint something purple, then your complementary colour would be some form of yellow. If you were going to paint something more red, then your complementary colour would be green. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, what the Impressionists used to do is they used to obviously paint very, very, usually very slabby, you know, textured brush strokes, very loose, in order to create their sort of iconic look, or now iconic look. But they used to layer complementary colours, so if they put a green down, you know, they would put the complementary colour of green right beside it. So if they put a purple down, they would put their yellow down, you know, and right beside it, so that the eye is constantly stimulated, so that the eye is constantly going, ooh, like, you know, I'm engaged by these colours. And so although it actually looks like one solid colour, like for example, if you're looking at an Impressionist paint the sea, it looks like one sort of homogeneous colour that the sea would be. It's actually not. It's many, many, many complementary colours layered beside each other in order to keep that dynamicism, that look, so that you actually have, you know, this constant intrigue with the painting, and when you're looking at the painting, it always holds your attention. So that's like when we're painting greens, right? We're always adding in different shades, different colour variations, different saturation levels, different, more yellowy greens, more blue greens, some more subdued with the umber, some less subdued with the umber, some with a bit of grey in them, right? And it creates variety, right? It keeps things interesting. Now, as you can see, right now, I'm doing this big, nasty, mysterious looking, let's call it a ben, you know, because in Scotland we have our mountains that reach a certain height are all called ben, you know, like Ben Lomond, Ben Nevis, you know, Ben Clwch, right? So this is some mysterious mountain off in the distance, okay? And obviously, as you're sort of probably now seeing, there's 3 different layers to this landscape, you know, like, or in fact 4 if you include the mountain. So each getting further and further away. So as we're going further and further away, the greens and the greys are getting sort of more subdued, but realistically what really makes the difference is just the way that I've laid out the composition. And then with the oil layer, I'm going to push them back further with my mist technique, because I'm going to be adding in this sort of misty, mysterious look to this painting, and so it's going to get pushed back even further, right? So that's the way that this is going to be achieved here. And this is the way that we're actually going to create tonal depth to this painting. And it's a technique that's very, very fun to do. I feel this is my oil layer now starting, so down here I'm adding a little waterfall in, you know, just a little sort of babbling brook or some sort of, you know, waterway, and as you can see I'm using a brown colour. So yeah, fits in with the, you know, rugged browns and greens of the Highland landscape, and that's sort of what you would see in Scotland. Is you would see a brown waterway. It's probably all the peat and the you know, the sort of heavily, you know, peat dense water. But yeah, I'm adding in, you know, Flake White Hue, some brown, just making a sort of splash, making, you know, the waterway, you know, so it sort of goes off, you know, behind those rocks there, and, you know, who knows what's going on. There might be a little cave down there where bandits have, you know, like hidden, who knows, because I want this atmosphere to evoke mystery, you know, like clan warfare has happened in the distant past, and, you know, cattle reaving and smuggling, and, you know, just all sorts of incredible adventures and mystery and paranormal activity, and just, you know, all of this just coming to a head. So that's what I want this landscape to evoke, you know. But yeah, just adding in little indications of water, little indications of a waterway there. Sort of frustrated me a little bit doing this. You know? Anyway, yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things with water and with skies. I'm still firmly rooted into doing it with oils. I probably, to be fair, could have achieved the same thing with acrylic though, you know? But oils just have I think you can get a hazier look with oils as well. Like see if you want to do like clouds and mist and that sort of thing with oils, I just feel like it's easier, and that's also because of the slow dry time. You can blend them onto the canvas, whereas I don't know, I struggle to do that more with you know, with acrylics. So yep, adding in a mixture of Umber, Paynes Grey, Flake White Hue. You know, I think there's actually even a bit of Naples Yellow in there. You know, just a sort of earthy mixture to create this mist, which is what this is gonna become. Because right now I'm just throwing paint on the canvas, but as you can see, I've got my fan brush out, and now I'm just blending it all out with the fan brush, you know, and now I'm blending it out with a big soft bristle brush, and blending all of this sort of foggy colour out, taking rags, blending it all so that it sort of amalgamates with the layers at the bottom. And this is the process. This is what I want to do with the oil layers. basically create this this three-tiered landscape, this three-tiered what would be the word that I'm looking for, this atmosphere, this layering of atmosphere with the mist. That's what I want to achieve with my oil layer. So just chucking it all in there, chucking in Flake White Hue just to make the foggy colour pop a little bit, blending it all out, just so that I can create this this atmospheric depth. And I think you can probably see where this is going, right? Because by the time I get to here, okay, yes, it's going to push that mountain all the way back, because the mist is going to almost make it like it's in the far distance. And that's the way that obviously the painting and the composition has been designed, so that when I add in all this mist, it's going to push that that mountain right off into the distance, because it's also grey, right? So it's going to blend more with the colour of the sky and also the colour of the mist. Just blending it all out with a big brush, adding in all of these little interesting fogs, blending it all out, so that the mountain is pushed off into the distance. And then obviously when I add my sky, same rule applies. I'm going to be amalgamating the colour of the mist with the sky colour, so that it all comes together, right? Now, as you can see, sort of 3 layers have been achieved now with my mist, so the sort of 3 distinct terrains. Obviously we've got the main one, which is our main focal point of the painting at the front, and now we have the sort of 2 pushed off into the distance with the mist, and then we have the mountain. So yeah, this is sort of what I wanted to achieve with this composition, adding in a sort of subdued blue. It's sort of more Flake White Hue than blue, and then with a nice bit of umber and grey in it, just to tone it down a little bit. I'm quite happy with how the sky turned out, to be fair. Yeah, worked at it for a little bit. This was actually my lunchtime as well, so I snuck off for a bowl of soup, and then obviously came back reinvigorated, yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is what you want, is you want this sort of amalgamation between the mountain, the fog, and everything else, so that it sort of all just works, and homogenizes into one, so that your atmospheric depth is actually going to work, and so that mountain is going to really appear far off. That's the key to this, I think. And this is why I love oil paint, is you just blend it all out, and it just looks good. Oil paint looks good blended. Whereas acrylics, I think it's far more difficult to get that almost subdued, soft effects that you can get with oils, depending on obviously what you want them for or what you're using them for, because not everybody wants that. Depends what you're actually utilizing oil for, like whether it's being utilized for detail work or not, or whatever. Everyone's different. But for me, one of the main things that draws me to oil paints is the fact that I can get this airy, mysterious, ethereal effect with them by blending everything out to make everything look super soft, you know. Adding in some purples. When I say purples, I mean very subdued purples. Now I'm going in with the palette knife and just adding in some greys, some umbers, you know, just to make the sky a little bit more interesting. Blending it out a little bit. Yeah. Adding in more mist, just to sort of have the mist amalgamate slightly with the clouds. I felt like that was important, so just adding that in so that it all blends into one, you know. Now adding in my sun, or you know, just a little indication of brightness, you know, subdued brightness. Yeah. And you know, this is me really rounding off the painting now, and you know, just adding little finishing touches here and there, but really it's pretty much all done, you know. And you know, that's a pretty good light to actually see what it really looks like as well, because a lot of the time you know, when I take the photo at the end, it's a bit glary because of the light. But yeah, here it is. Here's the final result, and very happy with it. Very happy with it. You know, just very sort of interesting, dynamic Highland landscape, and I think you know, I'm happy with how it turned out. I think I evoked the Highlands pretty well, which was the aim. So yeah, with episode 13, I'm still undecided as to what I'm actually going to do. I'm actually visiting my dad in London, so there might be a few week hiatus, but tune in when episode 13 actually comes out. And goodbye. Thank you very much for watching.